Hello, 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 and welcome, welcome, welcome. So today, excuse me, sorry, today I'm going to be talking about the creative process while I do something creative, while I'm processing. Um, and yeah, so if you haven't sort of watched a couple of the other weeks of work, every week I'm going to try to do two episodes. One is sort of just me chatting back and forth with you, hopefully, if there's somebody live. And otherwise, sorry, you just get my thoughts. Um, and and then I'm gonna do that while I'm doing something creative. And the other time, I'm actually it's more like a tutorial type thing where hopefully I'll give you enough time to get the supplies, and then we can do something together. And then if you have questions, then I can um, answer them as best I can from my perspective and my experience. So that's kind of where we are now. And um, so today I'm going to be working on. I actually have two because I have this canvas here that I started. I was going to do an acrylic painting on, and then I decided, no, I'm going to do something else with it. I'll add some acrylics back onto it, but I think I'm going to do a similar sort of idea as to what I'm doing here, but I'm going to reverse it a bit. So some of the papers that I might use on this piece now, I might also use on this, and that's why I just happen to have it here beside me. It's also why I happen to have two brushes because I don't know if any of the acrylic paint will lift off and transfer to this, which is not a big deal if it does, but I just figured I'd try to keep it even. So this piece I started last week, and it's a piece that is basically going to be a water scene up here, and then there's going to be a horizon skies thing up here. And I coated it before the live, and I've just been applying some Japanese papers to it, and I pulled out a few others. As much as I love this right here, I'm actually going to cover it up with something a bit deeper and darker because I just started doing it, and I thought, yeah, no, it needs to. I want to bring the depth, and then the lightness, and then turn into the sky. So even though I don't do a lot that's realistic, I try to sort of make it somewhat realistic. If you catch my drift. So you see me take these on and off as I go because I'm still just working with the webcam. And once I get into the streaming, then I'll have multiple cameras. I can just punch a button and you can see an angle from a different camera. And yeah, we can go from there. So the creative process actually it doesn't sort of matter. It doesn't sort of matter in some ways what the art is or what the art medium is, whether it be music or art or um, like fine art or even drama or whatever. Um, Even cooking, like there's sort of just a process that you go through, and I'm sort of going to talk a little bit about what my creative process is and sort of how I see things as I go over sort of the more general terms or what have you. So, for example, like the creative process generally has four or five aspects to it, right? There's preparation, incubation, sort of insight, and then evaluation and implementation. So, and I think not every artist goes through all of these with everything that they do, but I think these are the sort of the most common sorts of things. I was talking to a friend who, um, well, I've got a couple of friends actually who work in two different mediums. One's in music and one's in poetry, or that's how she started in poetry anyway. It's sort of evolved from there, and they get what they call downloads, which are which are just basically everything is sort of given to you in one piece, or a large chunk of it is given to you in one piece, and so your inspiration isn't sort of taking Okay, well, I've got this one piece of paper, and I'm going to lay this one piece of paper down, and then this piece of paper is going to talk to me, and then I'll be able to do something else with that piece of paper and add on to it, and it's multiple steps. Um, when Stephanie got downloaded with her poetry, like she had a whole anthology of poems downloaded within a couple of weeks, and um, and they came to her pretty much in their full form, which was like incredible. And and my friend does music and stuff. Then he's sort of come into downloads that where the music hits him, and then he fits his lyrics and stuff in around it. And um, it doesn't happen for me like that in most instances. Sometimes I get what I call like an inspirational message. But it's never, it's for me, it's never the full thing. It comes in bits and pieces, and then I run with it, and then I put it away, and then something will happen again, and then I'll run with it and I'll put it away. And sometimes it's for me, it's like life, just life gives me the topic or the framework. Sometimes it's you know, I'll see something in either another piece of work or in nature or whatever, and um, that'll give me sort of the inspiration to move forward with something. So it's a little bit different for different artists. What that looks like, um, and it sort of, whatever way it is, whether it comes to you as a full download or whether it comes to you in bits and pieces or it comes to you with just simply like one or two words or whatever. Um, there's sort of a time period where you're gathering information. You're sort of like a researcher. You're going out and you're gathering information. And like I know when I do, um, anybody who's sort of been following me at all sort of knows that I've been doing a little bit of music again after many years. And what I find with the lyrics is sometimes I'll get like a phrase, like two or three words, and I'll just throw it into a document. And other times I'll get a stanza or a couplet or something like that kind of thing that just sort of resonates with me. And it may not even go with whatever else I'm working on, but it's something that I know if I don't like it just speaks to me in that moment. And if I don't capture it in some way, shape, or form, then it will be lost forever. Because as much as I think that I will remember, especially like these super powerful um, like images or visions or whatever, it doesn't matter how strong they are for me, if I don't capture them in some way, shape, or form, um, I will lose it. Because I don't know why, I just do. I guess I've got just so much stuff going on in my mind, as most of us do. um, so I just, yeah, I have to find some way, and I should probably find a better way, because I basically will, if I'm if I'm sitting at my desk, I might just take a scrap of paper and then just write down ideas on the scraps of paper, and then I have to catalog them afterwards. Um, but I'm sitting at my desk, so I could just pull up a document, for example, or it could be that I'm out somewhere, and so I'll do a voice recording, or I'll take a picture, or I'll. But then I've still got to be able to go back and find some way to go through them and catalog them, and that takes a little bit of. Oops, quite wet enough there. Takes a little bit of time as well. So it's kind of a chaotic mess for me, but at least it's there to pull up when I need it. Um, so that's sort of like the preparation part, and and then once I sort of, and I do the same thing when I'm working on a piece. So I'm working with this piece now. I know that in front of me right now, all I need my tapioca paste, and I need some papers, and I need the ground that I'm working on, which is the canvases in this instance. And so for me, the and I do the same thing when I do jewelry, like a lot of the stuff that I do. If I have the supplies in front of me, then I can pull from them what I need in order for the piece to move forward. If I have to start going looking for things, then stuff doesn't. get accomplished. And it doesn't, not that it doesn't get accomplished, doesn't get accomplished as quickly. Oh, hey Russell, thanks. Um, so yeah, so I just find that if I gather the tools, and I gather the whether that be the tools of the trade, like in this instance, the paper, the water, the paste and stuff, or the tools meaning the whatever I've had downloaded, so to speak, the research that I've done, or the inspiration that I have. Um, yeah, I tend to work better if I can have them at my fingertips, which is also why my studio is a somewhat chaotic mess, because I want everything at my fingertips because I'm working on 12 projects at one time. So, oops, I'm going to put the paintbrush in my glass of water rather than my container of water. Yeah, so we've got the creative, so we've got the preparation, then we've got the incubation, and that's kind of one of the. Now, some people don't need a long period of incubation, and sometimes when you're right into the flow of it, things just move almost organically through the process. But oftentimes, um, for me, I need a period of rest. So, and I don't mean rest physically or even from my head mentally. It's for all of the for whatever I've done to that point to just sort of um, come together. I find that with my artwork in particular, I I have to let it speak, which may sound bizarre, but it is what it is. Um, Whoops. I put my keyboard underneath on top of a tower and it just fell over. But I find that I need to let it speak to me. And so in doing that, um, I have to let it sit for a while. And when I come back to it with fresh eyes, it's almost like editing. If I'm going to edit any writing that I do, I have to do the rough draft and then I have to walk away. Sometimes I walk away for, a couple of days. Sometimes I walk away for, an afternoon, whatever. But I find that if I let it just rest, and I come back with fresh eyes, that it speaks to me in a different way than if I push through. Now, when I'm in a total zone sort of thing, then I just keep going with it. I go with it until I need to stop. Um, um, this is tapioca paste that I've got on here, and what the tapioca paste does is it just allows me to glue the paper down without it actually distorting the paper. It's almost like, it dries clear. I can put on layers and layers of it if I want to, or just a very thin layer. Yeah. So then there's this incubation period. So that's what I did with this piece. Like I started with this paper underneath, this greeny blue one, because I really love the paper, and so I tend to start with what I love most first. and and then I realized, as I started working the next layer, I thought, okay, I'm going in reverse. I'm going darker when I need to actually have started darker. So then I thought, okay, well, how am I going to do this? And I just thought, well, I'm just going to cover it over, or at least cover parts of it over anyway, and let some other things peek through. And that's all good because this piece is going to be a built-up piece anyway. It's going to be a sort of a not 3D piece, but it's going to be a much more dimensional piece, especially once I get into things like the shells and the sand and stuff like that. So I don't mind it. I don't mind having a couple of extra layers. The only downside is that I'm using my beautiful Japanese papers and they're going to get covered up, but that's all right. It's all good. It's all part of it. Yeah, so we've got this incubation period where the ideas just kind of sit. When I'm doing music, for example, I'll go back. I'll maybe pick up the melody, and then I'll go back and I'll um, move through the melody, and it might strike me differently in a different. Sorry for the dog barking in the background if you can hear him. But it might strike me differently in that moment, and so the melody might change a bit, or I might change some of the lyrics, or I might, there's all kinds of ways in which it might morph and change during that process, because it speaks to me differently. And that's not to say it's bad or worse; it's just different. um, and then you sort of move into the third stage, which is kind of the insight stage, which is, um, so sometimes for me it's like this bolt of lightning hits me, and it's like, oh, I know exactly where I'm going now, and everything. It's like the heavens open, the angels sing, the sunlight streams down on the artwork, or on the or on the keyboard, or whatever, and it's like, yeah, it's smooth sailing from there. And that's one of my favorite stages. I've got to say, one of my favorite stages, because clarity is everything. Um, it's easier to go through. I mean, I love the creative, like, I don't know what I'm doing stages, as things start to take place. Because sometimes I'll just say, okay, today I'm going to do a painting. I'm going to, sit down and write a song, and I have nothing in front of me. I don't, I've skipped those those first couple of steps, and you're starting with that blank canvas, or that blank sheet, and so it's a little bit, yeah, clarity is everything. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what you're doing, does it, Russell? I mean, you need to be clear. Um, and so that's like a fun playing stage. When I do that, when I don't work through the steps. Um, and then you've got this sort of evaluation stage, and between the incubation stage for me and the evaluation stage for me are my two longest stages. And some people might say in some of my pieces of work, they didn't ever get past that, which is why they're still not finished. Um, but the the evaluation stage is interesting for me, because I'm just gonna move this over a little bit. Sorry. Um, because it's when I look at, what it is that I'm trying to say as an artist, what it is that I'm trying to um, get across, in terms of the meaning or the feeling of the piece, which I don't I don't put a lot of not that I don't put a lot of thought into it, but I don't put a lot of weight. I don't give it a lot of weight in some ways, because what I create here might speak to me in a totally different way than the way it would speak to you as a viewer. It might it you know First of all, I used to think, okay, well, if I do it really, really, really well, then what I'm trying to say will land with you. But I have found over the years that that's not always the case. I mean, sometimes it happens and it's beautiful and I love it, but I've given up that whole feeling of, oh, but you have to understand what it was I was trying to do with this piece, and what it means, and blah blah blah, because what happens is people view things from their own perspective, right? Just in life in general. They bring their own life experiences to it, and um, let this one go a little bit this way. They bring their own life experiences to it, and um, they view it through their own lens of life. So, they won't necessarily get what it was that I was trying to say, because I've lived a different life than they have. So, what I hope is that, as I do art, and as if people purchase it, or I gift it, or they choose it, or as I often say, it chooses them. um, what I My only hope is that it speaks to them in some way, shape, or form. And it's the same thing with, like, jewelry. Like, if I have a whole table of jewelry laid out, I mean, I might have two or three favorite pieces, although how do you pick your favorite child? But, two or three favorite pieces. but somebody else might resonate with something totally differently than I do. And that's why you can make anything and it will resonate with the right person at the right time. In one of my jewelry groups, especially at the end of the year, we're always wondering, okay, now what do we do with pieces? Because sometimes you have pieces we have for years that so I'm just coming with another couple of sheets of paper here. Sorry for the rustling there. I was gonna say sorry for the rustling rustle, but that just the oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. Trying to be funny here, and I lost my train of thought. Yeah, so as long as it speaks to somebody in some way, shape, or form, then it works. Is what I'm finding, and that. But the evaluation, for me, that stage in the creative process is more not focused on it's not focused on other people. It's focused on, is this working for me? Is this feeling that I'm trying to get across? Do I feel it? Does it? It's not about the other person. It's only about me as the artist. And have I successfully, is there a better way that I could, like for example, this piece that I'm working on now, if I want this to feel like the ocean, well, then I know that the deeper the ocean, the deeper the coloring needs to be. So, starting with the lighter green at the bottom really is not going to work, because it's just not a. Is this the water one? Or is this the blue one? Oh, it's the blue one. Okay. So that was part of the evaluation, even though I had just started the piece. It wasn't like I was at the end of the piece. And when I put things down, so if I go through some of the other stages, and I put the piece down, and it's in its incubation stage, for example, then I still come back to it with an evaluative eye to it. I think when I start adding on some of the paint layers on top of this too, this will get to be a little bit stronger. Now water goes back in the water container, so I don't mix it up with the glue container, the glue brush. I often color my at least the end of my brush, so I remember, because you really can't tell a difference, much of a difference. And this piece, I'm going to start to build up some of the layers on this now. So if you're sort of watching the process part of this at all, it's I'm just going to glob this glue on. You'll start to see that it's not going flat. I don't need it. I actually don't want it to go flat now. I want it to sort of bend and bubble and start to create some texture, even though it's so close to the beginning stages. Because as the paper starts to do that, as the paper starts to lift and bubble and create some texture, then the layers that go on top of it will also do the same kind of a thing. But I do have a little bit too much water here, I think. Yeah, so I evaluate in terms of what it means to me. Am I getting what I want to say across? And that's sort of the evaluation process. And then there's the implementation. So the implementation process is more like, have I successfully brought this piece to where it is I want it to go? And this is the part where, if I'm going to screw it up at all, this is where I screw it up, because I will overwork it. I think that's one of the reasons why my evaluation process has grown over the years, because as I overwork things, um, I take it too far, and then you try to bring it back, and you just end up like I've trashed so many pieces of art over the years because it's gone so far, and it's like, yeah, no, it's not speaking to me anymore. It's just this massive. In fact, years and years ago, when I first started going into when I first started doing art, so my art journey was such that I was a teacher back in the 80s. Oh my God, it only seems like yesterday, but it was, decades ago now. Um, and mainly I was hired as the drama teacher and an English teacher. And they asked me if I could teach some art. And I said, sure. So I basically spent a summer um, really delving into art, which I hadn't done. When I went to university, I went to university in Newfoundland, and we didn't have art offered even to take classes here. Um, they opened a campus while I was at university, and that's where they taught it. But it was, like 8 hours away. So I didn't actually take art at university until I started teaching, and then I went and did a whole whack of art courses and methodology courses and so on and so forth. Um, and I did a lot of art myself then because I was young and free, and yeah, I could do whatever I wanted. And these pieces are too wet, so I have to come back and glue them down after. And I don't know if you can see this. I'll just show you. You sort of start to see there's a little bit of movement with the water, the way as the papers of, especially these ones here, have started to flow a little bit, which is kind of what I'm hoping for. Movement, unless it's frozen. And even when water's frozen, you can still see movement in it. So, yeah, I'm just let those sit for a bit. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse this a little bit now and work on the sky while I let that. I probably shouldn't put that on top of my sewing machine, but anyway, it is what it is. So for the sky, because I'm not going to stay on this live too long, just so you get an idea. I've got this piece that I'm going to use, which has just flecks of blue in it. And I'm also going to use, which I thought I took out already. Here it is. This bit of yellow. I'm going to make it like this, like a soft kind of a sunsetty feel to it. Just keeping it light because I want the ocean to be the sort of the main focal point. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of this, and then I'll put the rest back in the map cabinet. Oh, I had a chance yesterday. If I'd been faster on the phone, I had a chance yesterday to get 2 more map cabinets for a really good price because somebody was selling them off. But I wasn't able to take the call at the time, and so I missed the opportunity, which would have been fantastic because I've got boxes and boxes of like drafting boxes you can roll your plans up in, which is great for storage, but they're taking up an entire corner of my studio. And also, anytime I want to get something, I've got to unroll all the papers. Then the worst part is that I have to roll them up again. And I don't think we need a lot of this one, so I'm just going to put it here, I think. Yeah, so sorry, I'm sort of talking to myself, which I often do in my day. It's a thing when you're working on your own as a solopreneur or an artist or whatever it is you want to call yourself. You spend a lot of time alone, and so you ask yourself questions, you answer questions. I laugh at myself all day long. So Russell, in your day, your day is much different than mine is. Um, and you're in a lot of ways, you're almost what you do is almost not diametrically opposed, but it's much more black and white than what my day is. And what do you find with the creative process? Like, do you go through sort of these different stages at all? Because there are things that you do that you create. Um, even just like in teaching and stuff, like you have to create certain things. So if you're able to answer, I'd love to know sort of what the creative process may look like for you. Or or it doesn't have to be with your work. It could be anything that you're doing that you do creatively, or that you do with a thought to creativity. Um, I try to keep these sessions to about 45 minutes, so I'm just sort of watching the time. Uh, so that I don't, because I could keep doing this all day long, but you don't necessarily. I don't mean you specifically, Russell, but I mean just people in general don't need to be watching this on YouTube Live for more than a short period of time. Um, excuse me. Yep. So the um, implementation process is definitely one that um, I'm wary of, because like I say, it's often where I ruin things, and because what happens is in the implementation, I go back to evaluation. So I don't just refine. When I'm not working the way I should be working, I don't refine. I refute almost. I I I take what my thought was, and I overwork it to such an extent that I lose the thought altogether. So that is not good. I ended up with a lot of things on the studio floor, so to speak, the cutting floor. If I was doing a movie production. um, and so yeah, I find that each one of these stages, if I unless I'm totally downloading in a way that is um, is happening in one or two sessions, I find that each of these stages depends on the piece, on what I'm working on, but they can be really long. They can be so long that I don't get back to them for years, which has happened. I have a number of pieces in the basement that I haven't touched in years, but I know that I'm not done with them. So it's funny, as a creative person, well, okay, from my point of view, as a creative person, I know when I'm done. Like I know, like when I used to sew, if I came across, like if I didn't sew something properly and I sort of went with it, I didn't take the time to pick it out, go back like my grandmother had taught me to do. Um, then I would keep going. And then I get so far up there, and then it would be like, oh, yeah, now I get it, because I didn't take this back, this 6 steps back ago. I didn't go back and refine what it was I was doing then. Now it is to the point where it's giving me problems. And then for me, like in sewing, I just as soon take that piece and chuck it and and start all over again than have to go back and take stuff out. I'm like that sometimes with knitting as well. I would rather I would rather just start the scarf again, or the sweater, or the whatever again, and then go back 12 rows to find the mistake. Now sometimes you go back 12 rows to find the mistake and fix it, which is great. That's my favorite thing. Well, my favorite thing is not to have the mistake 12 rows back to start with. um, yeah. So yeah. So basically, the creative process in almost anything you do hits some semblance of the stages of preparation, incubation, insight or illumination, evaluation, and implementation. And like one of the ways, I'm just going to give you just a sort of a quick example of something that um, a comparison. So if I'm talking about art, for example, I'm talking about the idea, right? So um, it might be inspired by personal experiences, by emotions, by observations, that sort of a thing. And in music, it might be more about the composition. It still might be about personal experiences, emotions, or observations, but it might also be about the composition of the music itself. Might lead into how the piece is going to set up. Um, some musicians, they hear the music, other musicians hear the lyrics. That's why. So I'm a huge fan of musicals. I think it was, I don't know, it's because my grandparents maybe or my mom, but because mom was a dancer for 23 years. She danced with Ethel Merman on stage at one point in time in her career, towards the end of her career. When she got married and had me, she gave it all up. Um, but this is a total sidebar there. But um, I grew up with musicals, and so I always, and the music the music and the lyrics always just seem to go together so effortlessly. And then, now you can sort of go back and you can listen to some of the old footage of how a lot of these um, artists would, how they were inspired by something, and how one would come up with music, another would come up with the lyrics, and they would just make them work together. It wasn't always the one person doing everything, right? So that's whereas in my world, it's me doing everything at the moment. Um, Although I do love to do some collaborative pieces, which I haven't done in a number of years. So I might reach out and do some more collaborative pieces, because you really do. It's like anything, the more. I mean, sometimes yes, you can get too many fingers in the pot, so to speak, but oftentimes, one person's idea will just bam you forward, and will something will just land with you, and you can run with it. And so I love talking over stuff with people, getting ideas from them. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to do some of these sessions live, because I'd love to get feedback on, um, what have you tried this, or have you thought about that, or because this makes me a better artist, I think. Um, so yeah, and so then in art, like I might do a planning stage where I'll sketch things out. Like this piece I sort of have going in my head, but oftentimes, especially with jewelry and stuff, I'll actually sketch out the design first, partly because the metals are so expensive to work with, but also because I need to know um, a bit more about where I'm going with what tools that I have, and so there's a bit more of a sketching planning session to that part of it. Whereas a musician might be about the structure of the song, or it might be about how the chord progresses, or about um, how the melody moves forward. And so it's going to look different. That same stage, planning stage, will look different for a musician than it will be for an artist. The execution stage might be, um, like, for an artist, might be actually creating the actual art piece, and for a musician it might be actually creating the actual music. um, but it might be, so here I'm working with layers of different paper, and for a musician it could be like the layers, meaning you know the different instruments as they come together, how it orchestrates, It might be the tech side of it, you know. So that's a little bit different. And then the refinement stage, again, we both go through refinement stages, but it might be, um, you know, me just adding a little bit more paint, like, you know, I'm going to add in some like orange paints and red paints and that kind of stuff in here to get a bit more of a sunsetty bit of purple. I'll do some of the same with papers and stuff as well. But you know, I might just decide I want to make the skyline a little bit deeper, so I might go back and add something in there. Whereas for a musician, it might be that, you know, it might be the timing. They want to adjust the timing a little bit, or they want to adjust the beat of one instrument a little bit, or um, you know, so it's going to look different, but it's going to be the same sort of stages. So that's kind of what I mean by, you know, we all go through similar stages, but it looks different for each of us. So if you're listening to the replays at all, and you know, I'd love to know about your creative process as well, because you know, what speaks to you, what stages do you, you know, is it just me who gets stuck on some of these stages? Do you also get stuck on some of these stages? Oh, there's the dog again. Somebody must be coming home. Yeah, so that's kind of all I was going to say about that. And I'll just wait a second. Russell, if you have anything you'd love to add, I'd love to hear it. Or anything about, you know, you going through any sort of creative process in your own. And you may not be able to speak, and I totally get that too. So I'm just going to add in this little bit of sky here anyway. I also need to grab another brush because that one is falling apart a little bit. So it's also another reason why I have so many things in my studio, because I've got multiples as well. I think actually I'm just going to put this whole part here with some glue paste and lay things on. Now my sky, I want to keep a little bit more flat in some instances, because although I do have an idea for clouds, which actually I got from our Christmas village being put down, and I thought, oh, that bundle of snow that we made could actually make really nice clouds on some of my pieces. So as we put the Christmas village away, I might turn snow into clouds. How cool is that? Not that I would liken myself to Mother Nature or God or anybody, but there's something sort of satisfying about being able to do that. I mean, and let's face it, Mother Nature does it all the time, right? Put some changes snow into, or precipitation into different forms, and so you can sort of see this is starting to take a little bit of shape. I'll bring in some of that blue flecky paper in here as well and overlay some of that. I'm going to bring in some oranges and stuff as well, but I wanted to sort of have the other thing I'm going to do too, which you'll see, because this will be the piece probably that I'll work on the most going forward the next couple of weeks anyway. You'll start to see some of the more translucent, as we get to some of the higher levels, you'll start to see some more translucent Japanese papers come through, so the colors will poke through a lot more. I mean, even here, even though I sort of covered over a lot of that paper, you can still see where there's areas where it's poking through, which is what I love about the Japanese papers. So Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you, Russell, for keeping me company while I started working on this again. And I'm going to finish off the edges of these papers and let it dry a little bit first, and then have it ready for the next time. So thanks again, everyone. And yeah, on Friday at 11 o'clock, I think, a.m., I'm doing a tutorial on how to make a magnetic clasp bracelet. So if anybody's interested in watching that, it'll be there. And if you're watching this on the replays down the road, then that will also, be there if you wanted to watch it. And thanks again. Have a great day.